and welcome to my channel. My name is Kate, and today I am doing both a channel update and sort of a November TBR slash Readathon MBR. So I know that I have been basically radio silent for the last several months, and I apologize for that. I feel like I do this too often, but life has just kind of gotten in the way. Work has been really crazy, and I have not been able to do a lot of reading, so I didn't feel like I had a lot to update on. I am trying to get better about that, and I am going to try to be more consistent, which I feel like I've said a bunch of times and not followed through on, but I will do my best going forward. I am thinking about doing a tier list for all of the books that I have read between my last recent reads and now. I could also do separate review videos for that, so let me know if you guys have a preference. If you don't, I'll probably just do the tier list since that's less effort for me. It means shorter reviews on the books, but I kind of have to make a pick there, and so that's what I'm going with, unless you guys tell me that you'd rather see the longer form reviews for those. That is my channel update. Moving on to my November reading plan, which is all going to be centered on Once Upon a Readathon, which was created by Hannah Blackwell. I will have her channel linked down below. She has put a ton of time and effort into this, and I think it's going to be such a good time. There are a number of different teams you can join. Hannah has basically constructed a fairy tale for us to go through. Depending on the team that you pick, we're all going to be competing against each other in basically running through our own fairy tales. The prompts are based on fairy tale retellings, but you do not have to read fairy tale retellings. To get all of the details on this, check out Hannah's announcement video, which I will have linked down below as well as in the cards. I am just going to be going through what I might be reading for the readathon, so I'm not going to give as much detail as Hannah gives, and obviously I'm going to be a bit biased in that I am all team fairy godmothers. The co-hosts that are running this team are Maria from Maria Might Read That, Rye from Rye's Reading Corner, and Sarah from Sarah Reads. So I think it's going to be a great time, whether you join Team Fairy Godmothers or not. You should definitely join the readathon. I think we'll all have a blast with this. I have a mix of fairy tale retellings as well as completely unrelated things that happen to fit prompts. So it'll be a total mix for me. I have said that this is going to be an MBR, which is a might be read for anyone who's not familiar with that. I originally created a TBR right when I decided to join this readathon in November, and then changed it 2 or 3 times after that before just giving up and embracing the fact that I'm going to change my mind as I go, as I do with basically every readathon I've ever participated in. I will talk about the primary pick that I have set up for that prompt, as well as some alternates that I might toss in there. As you might have guessed from that quick overview, well, I don't know about quick, from that overview, I'm going to be talking about a ton of books. So this might be a little bit long of a TBR, but hopefully I'll be bringing up some books that are interesting to you, and let me know if you've read any of them or if you really want to hear my thoughts on them, since that might guide my choices a little bit. So starting with the very first step along our fairy tale journey, each step is a part of the story, and so the very first step is to research a magical apple tree. And for that, there are 3 different prompts. You only have to complete 1 to complete the first step along the journey, and that'll be true for the rest of these steps. I believe there's a total of 5 steps. So for this first step, the first prompt is to find a book to read a book featuring royalty. The second one is to read a retelling that can be a fairy tale, a fable, or myth. And then the third possible prompt is to read a book with once, upon, a, or time in the title. And you get extra points for a hard mode, which is where it has at least 2 of those words in the title. For featuring royalty, as well as for a retelling, I have picked Spinning Silver by Naomi Novik. This has been on my TBR for a very long time. Rumpelstiltskin retelling, I believe, with sort of a wintry atmosphere. It is also the book club pick for the book club that Hannah hosts. I think it's the Femmes Aficionados. Sorry, I have not joined any. I didn't join their previous pick, but I am, since I wanted to read this anyway, I will probably join their read along that they are doing. I believe they're doing a live show in December for this, but it sounded really fun, and I didn't love Uprooted by Novik, but I want to give her another chance, and this one sounded like a good one, so this is my primary pick for this particular step. For alternates, I have a number of them, and a number of them will fit multiple categories. So I have The Bone Spindle by Leslie Vedder. Sounds like it's sort of an Indiana Jones mixed with a Sleeping Beauty retelling, with some gender swapping going in there, some romance. It just sounds like it'll be a really great time. And this one would fit both for royalty, because there is a prince who is awakened by one of the main characters, and it would fit for retelling because it has Sleeping Beauty elements in it. And I have Little Thieves by Margaret Owen, which is a Goose Girl retelling, which also happens to have a princess as part of the story, so it would fit for royalty as well. I also have had this from Illumicrate for, I think I got it from Illumicrate last year and never got around to reading it. Then I have a slightly embarrassing alternate, and that is Nettle and Bone, and it's only embarrassing in that I have yet to get to this. I actually started it, which you can see, might be able to see from the bookmark there, but it didn't immediately sell me, which is kind of shocking to me because I know a ton of people love this, and I love T. Kingfisher, and I've read a number of her other books. So I might try audio with this one if I end up picking it up during the readathon and see how I feel about it. It is a dark fantasy woman who is the youngest princess in a royal family. Her sisters have had to marry to secure the safety of their kingdom, but they have been abused by the prince that they end up marrying, and the youngest sister sets out to basically free them from this awful marriage without endangering their kingdom. This one would count for royalty, but it would not count for retelling, I don't believe, because it's not retelling a specific myth or fairy tale, but it would definitely count for royalty. And I have Lore Olympus in case I want a shorter or really fast read, and this is a Hades and Persephone retelling, which is actually a graphic novel. This version is really nice, and the art is really pretty, so I definitely want to get to that at some point. Then I have Starlit Wood, which is actually an anthology of stories based on fairy tales, so it would definitely hit royalty. It would also definitely hit retelling, but not the third section of that. Finally, and the only one I think that fits the third prompt in this particular step, is Once Upon a Dystopia. This is an indie anthology that is focused on, as you might guess, dystopians, so both sci-fi and fantasy style dystopians, and it should be interesting. It's definitely the one I would pick to cover that third prompt, and it does hit the hard mode for that third prompt. So that's my plan if I decide that I want to get to that third one. Step number 2 is to find the map to the apple tree. And for this, the 3 prompts are to read a book with a map, to read a book you have recently required, and the third prompt on this list is to read a book with red, orange, yellow, or brown on the cover. The hard mode part of that prompt is to read a book with 2 or more colors. My main pick for this step is The Black-Tongued Thief by Christopher Buehlman. I originally did not have this on my November TBR, but I am a patron of Jake over at The Bookish Drummer, and ended up getting picked for adding something to his TBR, and I've really been wanting to read this. I have both the book and the audiobook, which is narrated by the author, and he apparently does like a ye old Renaissance accent for it because he used to actually work at Renaissance fairs, and I think this would be, it just sounds super fun. But I think the main character is a thief and ends up attempting to pickpocket the wrong night and ends up on this crazy adventure in the process. It's supposed to be pretty humorous. I know it's been hit or miss for some people, which seems to often be the case with humorous fantasy, so it'll be interesting to see where I land. I hope Jake really enjoys this, and I feel like I'm definitely going to, so I have pretty high expectations for this one. As far as the prompts go, it hits the map one, because here is the map of the world for this guy. It does not hit recently acquired because I've had it for quite a long time, and it does have yellow, and I could maybe count orange. There's kind of, I don't know if that's like a dark yellow or an orange, so it would be a stretch to count this for the cover one. Another one that I could read is actually a nonfiction, and that is Philip and Alexander by Adrian Goldsworthy. I recently picked this up because I have read Unconquerable Sun by Kate Elliott, which is a sci-fi gender-bent Alexander the Great story, and this is about Alexander the Great and his father Philip. I've really been interested but don't know a ton about that time period, so I'd like to learn more, especially in the context of having read Unconquerable Sun, because I know that was heavily influenced, and even with my limited knowledge, I could see the nods to the history in that story, so it'd be super fun to read that. I did recently buy this, so it would count for that prompt. It also has a number of maps in here, so it would also count for maps. So one of the few non-fantasy that has maps in it, which is kind of the nice thing about history books, to be honest. Another possibility is Certain Dark Things by Silvia Moreno Garcia. I've heard great things about this story. It is a sort of, as I understand it, urban fantasy set in Mexico City, where one of the main characters is a vampire who is absolutely not supposed to be in the city, and ends up kind of dealing with mafia and gets the help of a local kid who needs to get out of the city. And so she is relying on this local kid to help her out. I love this cover, and it does have red and orange and yellow on it, so it would definitely count for that if I just pick it up for that prompt. And it's also recently acquired, so there's that. Another recently acquired one, because I have no self-control, is The Spare Man by Mary Robinette Kowal. So the basic story for this one is that Tesla Crane, who's a brilliant inventor and an heiress, is on her honeymoon on an interplanetary space liner, and someone ends up getting murdered. Her new husband, is accused of the crime, and she basically has to clear his name. So it sounded really fun. I'd love to get to this one, but it's definitely in the maybe pile. However, the one that I am more than likely going to pick up for this step, besides The Black-Tongued Thief, is The Ruin of Kings by Jenn Lyons. I have several friends who will not stop talking about this series and love it to death, so I really want to finally get to this series. It sounds like it is snarky and a bit of a puzzle, which is so much in my wheelhouse. I still can't believe I haven't picked this up yet. It is not recently acquired for me, but it is, does have red and yellow on the cover, so it would count for that cover prompt. Okay, so for step number 3, it is for Gather Companions. The first prompt is to read a book with a romance. The second is to read a book featuring family. And the third is to read a new-to-you author, and if you want hard mode for that prompt, it needs to be a debut author, and in this case, debut means that they have only published one book, not that you are reading a book that was their debut. So it's pickier than that, which is why it's hard mode. The one that I am likely going to pick for this counts for having a romance, and I think you could probably count it for featuring family, but would not fit for debut author, and I am trying for hard mode in all of those. So, and that is A Taste of Golden Iron by Alexander Rowland. This is the incredibly beautiful broken binding edition of this book. It is a fantasy romance that I think is a prince and his bodyguard end up having to solve a conspiracy. I believe it has mental health rep. It sounds like it'll be a very slow burn, intriguing romance, which I am all about. Hopefully not too slow burn for me, but we'll see how it goes. I am buddy reading this with Maria, which I am super excited for, so I think we'll have a lot of fun with this one. The pick that I will probably pick up if I want to complete the other prompts in this particular step is The Book Eaters by Sonia Dean. I have been wanting to read this since it came out and just have not made it happen yet, but it sounds so good, and it would work for family. It would also work for a new to me author. This one would not count for a debut author, or it wouldn't count for debut author. It would count for new to me, but not debut. The main character has been raised in a family that consumes stories instead of food in order to survive. She's been raised on a diet of essentially fairy tales. The men in the family have been raised, I believe, on adventure stories. And then her son ends up being a little bit unusual for the family in that instead of consuming books as food, he consumes people. And so it sounds creepy and really intriguing. I really, really want to get to this, so I would love to pick up this one for that particular prompt. Another one that would count for family is Mapping the Interior, which is a novella by Stephen Graham Jones. Super, super short, and I do love the cover for this book. Sort of a creepy, somewhat haunted house. If I need one for featuring family, this one would work for that. And since I know people have been struggling with finding a debut author, I went and found a bunch of the ones that have been on various TBRs for me that would count as a debut author if you have not previously picked them up. Because I have 5 of them, I'm going to be real quick about this and not give as much detail on the plot for any of them. So the first one is Bluebird by Ciel Pierlot. This is a sci-fi romp where you have a gunslinger who ends up having to complete a job because her sister has been held as a hostage, essentially. I have attempted to read this a couple times and keep having to set it down in favor of books that I have to get done, but it reminded me a lot of like a video game sort of sci-fi romp, so that one could be really fun. There's also This Vicious Grace, which I think a lot of people have heard about previously. The ruler of this particular area, she needs to be able to use her magical gifts in order to save her country, but she keeps accidentally killing the suitors who are supposed to help her sort of harness her gifts, and time is running out. So it's that one. Then there's The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah. This is a Middle Eastern inspired, like 1001 Nights sort of retelling-ish, with a thief who has been selling magical artifacts and ends up being blackmailed into finding a specific magical artifact for the ruler of the kingdom she's in. And there's Portrait of a Thief by Grace D. Lee. This is a contemporary sort of thriller heist story that is actually one of my 5-star predictions and would hit debut author. Then finally, and this one I confirmed as being a bit of a stretch, but might work, and that is The Ivory Key. It is a bit of a stretch because this author has had a story published in an anthology, but besides that, The Ivory Key is the only thing that she has had published. This is by Akshaya Raman, and it is a Indian-inspired fantasy, and so I really remember about it, to be honest. Okay, we're working our way down, and I have fewer possibilities for these last 2. Step number 4 is the quest for the apple tree, and the 3 prompts for that one are A Book with Magic, a book with a historical setting, and then for the third prompt, it needs to be more than 300 pages. You get hard mode if it's more than 450 pages. And for that, I'm actually picking the book club pick for a book club that I am in, which is the book Checkout. And we are going to be reading Black Sun by Rebecca Roanhorse. This is a fantasy that is based on pre-Columbian societies in the Americas, which is where it hits historical setting. It also has a lot of magic in it, as you might guess, from it being a historical fantasy. I think most people are at least aware of the premise here, so I'm not going to get super into that. My copy is 454 pages, so just over the hard mode limit on that one. Another possibility for historical, in case the pre-Columbian is a bit of a stretch, I also have the option of His Majesty's Dragon by Naomi Novik, which is Napoleonic war era plus dragons. So, I mean, you really can't go wrong there. It's definitely a historical setting. I also have Ghost Talkers by Mary Robinette Kowal, set during World War I, except that the main character can talk to ghosts and ends up having to investigate a mysterious death. So, this one could be a great pick for historical. Finally, for the historical, I have The Red Palace by June Hur. I've really enjoyed a previous book by this author that was also historical, set in the Joseon period in Korea, which I believe is 1800s. This one is a historical murder mystery featuring a young palace servant who ends up helping out a police inspector when there's a bunch of murders in the palace. The final one that I am attempting to fit in, because it is another book club pick. I just can't resist book clubs. That's just the way I am. And that is The Little Stranger by Sarah Waters. This is the pick for Jade's Bedtime Bookworms. If you're familiar with Jade, I'll have her YouTube channel linked down below. We are likely going to be reading this in late November, early December, but it's a doctor is called to the remote, wealthy household, and weird things are happening. So it sounds intriguing. Definitely sounds like Fall of the House of Usher. But I am curious to get to this, whether I get to it in the readathon or in December. And the main prompt that one fits is that it is over 450 pages. And I guess it has a historical setting too, so both those. So, the final step, we finally made it, we're almost there, is to climb the apple tree. And the 3 prompts for that is to read a book featuring a conflict, read a poll pick, so you can do a poll on Instagram, there's a section on the Discord server for this readathon, however you want to do it. Then the 3rd prompt is to read a book featuring an unlikable or morally gray character, and you get hard mode if the main character is a villain. So I have a couple different choices for that. My primary pick for this particular step is the Maleficent 7 by, I believe, Cameron Johnston. It is an indie fantasy where I don't have it physically, so I'll pop up a cover here. But basically, it's a sort of Kings in the Wild if they were all villains instead. There was a demonologist who basically put together a army of villains, basically conquered the entire continent until she just walked away at the eve of their victory. Now she has to bring everybody back together again to try and save them from a new enemy who's basically conquering everything. So it sounds like it'll be super fun. It did win a poll. It also definitely has villains as the main characters, and it does feature conflict. So it would count for all of them. If for some reason, I'm definitely going to choose it for poll pick, but if I need a backup for the other 2, I might pick Vicious by V.E. Schwab. I've had this on my shelves forever, and it just sounds really fun. It definitely would fit the hard mode with the villain character, because the main premise here is that you have these 2 brilliant scientists who end up researching basically near-death experiences and end up becoming enemies in the course of that. And they get powers, essentially, and end up on opposite sides and hate each other and want to take each other out. So I think this should be really interesting and somewhat dark, but it would fit for featuring a conflict, and it would fit for villain character. And thus ends my absolutely ridiculous MBR. I've gone through a ton of books, so no guarantees on anything I've mentioned here, but I will be attempting to read at least 5 books out of this enormous stack of books that I've talked about. Let me know what your reading plans are in November, and I definitely want to know if you are joining Once Upon a Readathon and what team you've picked. Hopefully Fairy Godmothers, but if not, definitely let me know what your reading plans are. Thanks for your patience with this long MBR, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!